This is an Eye on Annapolis bonus podcast.
Joining us on the phone today is Rear Admiral James McNeal, who is retired from the United States Navy, as well as Scott Tomasheski, who are the co-authors of a new book that is out. I believe is the only book about this, but it is the Herndon Climb, A History of the United States Naval Academy's Greatest Tradition. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Very good. Thanks.
Doing great. Thanks for having us on.
We believe it is the only book. It's the only book we've ever seen about the Herndon Climb.
Well, I will say, I'll take you to task a little bit. I mean, it is a great tradition of the Naval Academy. I'm not sure who says it's the greatest. I mean, there's a number of good traditions there. So
that's our opinion. That is our opinion for sure.
A little bit of editorial license there. That's
yes, absolutely,
for sure. Well, I mean, you just look at the traditions that surround the Naval Academy here in Annapolis. You know, the Army Navy game, the ring dance, the eyeball, the color parades, the march on for football games. The Blue Angels. I mean, it just kind of goes on.
Those are good. Yeah, those are good too. As far as the football game, well, that's a Navy and Army tradition. This is strictly Navy.
True.
So
absolutely.
Another thing that I believe makes it great is its uniqueness. Plenty of other dances and groups of stunt pilots and stuff in the world, but there is nothing in the world at any time that we ever came across that is anything like the Herndon Climb. It is a magnificently unique tradition. That's why we love it and think it's the greatest.
Well, what was the genesis of the book? I mean, we know that we don't believe there's another book written about it, which is very surprising considering it's been climbed for decades and decades. But what was the genesis?
I guess I can take that one. I think it was my idea, basically. Back in 2016, I happened to be watching ESPN Sports Center. And it was in May, and they have a segment, I don't know if you know Sports Center, but they have what they call the top 10 plays of the week, where they show a little video on just a variety of interesting little bits. It isn't, it's maybe a great basket that was made, or a great play that was made in a Little League game, or something, a bowling tournament or something, just anything sports related. And they did a little, like a 10-second segment with video on the Herndon Climb. And I saw, oh, wow, the Naval Academy, the Herndon Climb. That looks really interesting. So I emailed the Admiral there and asked him in the email, I said, I just heard about this thing called the Herndon Climb. Have you ever heard of it? Which
blissfully ignorant
turns out to be a little bit naive, but hey, you live and you learn. I didn't know anything about it, and it turns out that everybody knows about the Herndon Climb, of course, and Jimmy said it was the second proudest moment of my life.
Wow.
Next to graduation, and he's done a lot of things that he should be proud of in his life, and. When I heard that, I thought we can come up with some really good stories. I'm a writer of fiction, and he's a guy with all the connections at the Academy, and he's done a little writing too. And I thought it would be a great project for us to work on sometime in the future. I said, sometime after you're retired, I'm going to bug you about let's work on a book together about the Herndon Climb. And then he said, let's get started like now. And I realized, oh God.
Now it's getting real.
Admirals don't procrastinate. I procrastinate.
Well, how did you guys get together? I mean, what did you just go to the Yellow Pages and look for an admiral and say, hey, have you heard of the Herndon Climb?
Not at all. Not at all. You want to take that one, Jimmy?
Yeah. So, we have been friends since junior high school.
Oh, wow.
We met each other in 7th grade and became friends, over the course of that 3 years, and then went on to high school together. And we actually were on the same newspaper staff, along with kind of our group of friends, and have just been friends, literally 40 years, and have just, maintained contact and just have just been, really, really good friends for a long time. And so when he called me to do this, he left kind of one thing. I left out my perspective, and my perspective was it seemed like a lot of work, and I was right. And my big thing was I didn't know there was not a book. I thought Scott had stumbled onto an idea, but I said, look, I don't want to do the 17th book about the Herndon Climb. And what got me excited about it was when I did do a little bit of research while he was telling me his idea, and I did realize there was no book. And I thought, wow, this could really be something unique to work on something that's really never been done before. I
will say that Admiral McNeal, that you're an admiral, retired from the United States Navy, and this climb, and for those few people that are listening to this that may not know what it is, it is a obelisk that's on the yard or the campus of the United States Naval Academy that is slathered in, most years anyhow, slathered in lard or some sort of grease, and the freshman class climbs it and tries to replace a Dixie cup cover on the top to a true cover. And it's quite a spectacle, and probably, when you see it on ESPN, you're like scratching your head going, okay, why are, these, half naked people, all just a mass of writhing people climbing up this thing. But out of everything that you've experienced, both when you were in the fleet as far as graduation and everything through the academy, why does Herndon stand out as the most proud moment for you?
Second proudest.
Well, it was a great question. And for me, it was something that I did with a group of people. So really it wasn't about me. I was at the bottom of the climb. I was the base, if you want to use a cheer analogy. So I was being stood upon, and but it was something that I was doing with my class. And as I talk about in the book in the last chapter about some of my experiences during plebe year, there was a certain individual from the class of '83 who made sure that I had a very, very interesting plebe year. And I ended up surviving. And so when we got to Herndon and I realized that I had kind of made it, I was relieved. I was happy, but I was just proud that this group of men and women, this 1,100 of us that had started that plebe year, were now finishing plebe year, and we had taken everything that had been thrown at us, and we had not only survived, but we had done well. And it was just an overwhelm when the Dixie Cup got taken off and KJ Delamer put the combination cover on and plebe year was over. It was just such a tremendous feeling of just relief and pride and happiness that we had gotten through this experience. But it wasn't together. We had done it together. And that was what was so meaningful. It wasn't an individual accomplishment. It was a group accomplishment with a really phenomenal group of people that are lifelong friends. And if I meet someone from my class who I maybe didn't even know at school, and I met them tomorrow, I would have an instant bond with them. And that's what's so fantastic about the Naval Academy, is the friendships that you make.
Absolutely.
I can sort of confirm that part of that. Being a civilian myself, I didn't really participate in it, but having been there and watched the climb and talked to people who are doing it, and having talked to a number of people who did it over the years, it always comes back to that the difficulty, the almost brutality of plebe year, and the sense of relief that they get when they're done. And in that moment, one moment, almost like the clock striking midnight. As soon as that combo cover gets to the top of the monument, it is over for good, and you successfully completed it. That horrible, horrible plebe year that you will always remember and have some very unhappy memories of, but the memories become fond over the years with the pride that comes with having accomplished something so difficult.
It's funny you talk about it just being a team working together and everything else. And one thing that stood out when I was reading the book, and again, we're talking about the Herndon Climb, A History of the United States Naval Academy's Greatest Tradition. You can actually get that on Amazon. Locally here, you can get it at Old Fox Books, Back Creek Books. I'm not sure about Barnes & Noble, but you can get it at the Naval Institute Press, which published it at USNI.org. But one of the things that really stood out for me in the book was, and I don't know whether animosity is the right word, but the sexism, the misogyny that went on during the climb. And that was something that sort of evolved as you were writing that book, right? And I know I should say that Admiral McNeal's wife is also a graduate of the class of '86 as well at the Naval Academy, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Who graduated higher?
Oh, well, grade point average wise, neither one of us set the world on fire. She passed me grade point average wise, right at the end, right at graduation. But from a military order of merit, she was way higher than me. So she had a much more successful midshipman career than I did.
The words of a wise man who has learned many lessons, it sounds like to me.
Give his wife credit, but he's got a lot of explaining there behind that. You know, who graduated higher? Well,
yeah, but
Peggy, but you know.
But the animosity that was there, that, I mean, women had been in the academy for about a decade, a little bit less than a decade, I guess, when you had graduated. I mean, hadn't they worked that out in the prior 10 years, or was it just really that bad?
Well, it wasn't. So my wife's class, our class, was the 7th class that had women. So it was still relatively new, and the academy seemed to not really understand what being a woman at the Naval Academy was about. There was a exhibit at the museum for the 40th anniversary, and my wife and I went to it, and it showed some of the things that the academy did. And my wife was, yes, there was so many things that, you know, they gave us, you know, something for a man for us to use, and they realized that we were women. There were lots of examples of that, but from a cultural perspective, there were lots of my classmates and other, you know, men from other classes who just, for whatever reason, and I never understood it, did not want women at their school. So where I really became aware of it, and I certainly knew that at the time, but when I went to talk to my wife or mention, hey, Scott and I, you know, are talking about doing this book about Herndon, wasn't that a great day? I got a very lukewarm response from her. Later on, she mentioned, you know, I said, hey, how come you're not excited? And she said, Herndon to her was just another example of negative treatment that the women got. And then it dawned on me, that's right. I remember the girls being pulled down as they tried to climb up. I remember the no girls on Herndon. And it all kind of came back. And what was interesting as we went through the book, we had an idea of what we wanted to do, and we had submitted a proposal with chapters and such, and we didn't realize how the women chapter would roll out. And when I was soliciting information for, hey, let's hear your stories, because I got a lot of support from grads and some of the stories in the book we didn't even know about before we wrote it. I got about 6 to 8 emails from women in my wife's age range who said, we have a story to tell. Are you going to tell the true story, or are you going to tell the academy version that's sanitized that makes the academy look good? Or are you going to tell what really happened? And I said, no, we're going to tell what really happened. And that's where we got so many stories from these women who, you know, as you can read in the book, were not treated well. In fact, we have our 35th reunion coming up. We had 64 women in our class graduate out of 100 that showed up roughly. And I'm on the reunion committee, and one of the women, one of my classmates was talking about the fact that we have women in our class today who have not set foot on the academy and will not set foot on the academy for the rest of their lives since graduation because of what they went through at the Naval Academy. So instead of being such a proud moment and all that, for them it was a bit of trauma. And it's sad. But I think the good news is, and Scott can attest to this, having, you know, seen 2 in a row, the last 2 climbs, we didn't see any evidence of girls being pulled down. And I think it just took a generation or so for women to be accepted. And now that I'm there a lot as a coach and as a professor, the women are fully integrated. And really, when we tell some of the stories, or my wife tells some of the stories to some of the female midshipmen that we run across, they can't believe it. To them, it's a totally foreign experience. So it's gotten a lot better, but at the time it was not.
That's great. That's great news. What's your prediction? When are we going to see a female midshipman up top? I thought it came close. Obviously, last year they did not do it, but the year prior, I thought that was very close. There was one female that was just really into it, and I thought for sure she was going to get there.
Actually, in the very first climb women were in, as we talk about in the book, Barbara Ives, who who Jimmy interviewed for us. She got to the top and got her hand on the Dixie Cup, which had apparently been torn into pieces and sort of glued down. And she tumbled down. The men were definitely trying to pull her down, but she was so she could climb like a spider monkey, and she got up there and just kind of avoided the hands that were trying to pull her down. Made it to the top, and then when she finally she fell back down, and somebody else got the cover on top. So there've been a lot of close calls. And it does seem like a matter of, wow, it could happen anytime. I'd hate to predict when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen one of these years for sure.
Well, it is. I've always think that I've seen this probably 12 or 13 times. The last ones, obviously, they didn't have it in 2020, but I've got to think there's got to be a better method to doing this than what's done there. Didn't graduate from the academy. I've never participated in it, but it's hysterical to sit there and it's just this mass of people trying to do it. And it really appears to be every man for himself. And you say, pulling the women down. I mean, I think it's like, okay, well, no, I'll pull whoever's on top of me down because I want to get down there. It seems almost as you do that. But, and I guess, it's so good to hear that the academy has changed. Now, did they push back at you when you told the true story in the Herndon Climb book?
No, we have not gotten any sort of feedback. I don't know what they could have pushed back on. And I think the thing that really the women, and, if we don't have my wife on the podcast, but I think she would say she certainly understood the classmates, and there was resistance to the women. I think she perhaps in a very small percentage would say, well, they were kids. But I think what really disappoints the women is that the leadership at the academy at the time and the administration and the staff didn't do anything about it. It's kind of like they were the adults, right? So why, when they saw girls being pulled down, did they not do anything? And there were lots of instances of that where the women weren't treated very well, and the administration, the staff really didn't do anything about it. I think that's what disappoints them. But we have not gotten any feedback from the academy, and we've really all the feedback that I've received and Scott has received has been very, very positive. So.
Well, was it a hassle to get this book written? And I don't know whether you need approval from the Navy or the Naval Academy. Was it a hassle to get the permission to access the people that, the midshipmen that were on the yard, as well as, be there and everything else? Was that a problem, or were they all for it?
Were we supposed to get permission?
that whole ask permission or beg forgiveness.
People did just come out of the woodwork really wanting to talk to us and tell us their stories. And when Admiral McNeal reached out to any particular person, the response was always like, sure, I'd love to participate, and be in the book. And everybody was just very cooperative. And that part of it was very easy. It was a very easy book to write in that regard, I think.
Well, and the last climb, the 2019 climb, was the last climb of Admiral Carter, who was the superintendent at the time. And we interviewed him, and also we interviewed the officer in charge of the climb itself, and they were both really great. And Admiral Carter was, if you've seen the book, was kind enough to be one of the endorsers of it. And he's since moved on to be the president of Nebraska, the Nebraska University system. But so I wouldn't say we went rogue and didn't get permission. We talked to a lot of people, but we did talk to people at the academy. They were certainly aware that we were doing it, and I don't think there was any issues there. Well,
I'll tell you, as we wrap up again, we are on the phone with retired Rear Admiral James McNeal and Scott Tomasheski, who've been friends since 7th grade. Came together and wrote a book called The Herndon Climb, A History of the United States Naval Academy's Greatest Tradition. And the Herndon Climb actually is going to be happening again this year, and I'm very excited about that. That's going to be on the 22nd. And I can't wait to get in there and see how they're going to handle that in the era of COVID, as well as the whole graduation week that's coming up there. I know that Admiral Buck is determined to make sure that we have an in-person graduation and it be as normal as possible in this kind of weird world that we're living in at this point. Jim, you were born in Hawaii, right? And you were raised in Southern California?
Yes.
And now you're living here on the East Coast. Where do you like best? We'll put you on the spot.
Well, I think that my family is from California originally. My parents actually met in junior high school and graduate high school together, and high school sweethearts, and in a town called Vista, which is north of San Diego. So I would always prefer California. That's what I consider home. My wife, the reason we moved back here in 2018 is my wife got her PhD and was hired as a professor at Towson University. So we moved back to the East Coast about 3 years ago, and she's from Pennsylvania originally. So she did a long amount of time, over 30 years in San Diego, where we raised our kids. But she always has considered herself an East Coast person, and she loves the change of seasons, and she's just an East Coast person. So when she got this job at Towson, it was an easy sell to me. Yes, it's the East Coast, but being in close proximity to the Naval Academy and being able to be involved as we've been involved, we're sponsor a bunch of mids, some, the coaching and the teaching that I've done, and just, being able to go to football games and all that. So I'm not sure I would be as upbeat about it if it was somewhere where we had never been, but we feel very fortunate that she's landed a great position and I get to do what I want. I'm kind of semi-retired, so I get to do what I want when I want, and a lot of it involves the Naval Academy.
That's fantastic. Scott, what other types of books do you write?
I've written 3 books in a series. It's a fiction series, some time travel, fantasy stuff about a family of time travelers. It's called Time Defenders. There's 3 books in that series, and you can look at the website, timedefenders.com.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure I will put that in the show notes there so people can check that out as well. Again, I'll tell you, as we wrap up, I've got one final question or a comment for Jim, and I'll see if you can get the right answer on this one. I think you might be able to. But what needs to happen on December 11th at MetLife Stadium?
Beat Army.
There you go. Okay, that is the Army-Navy game.
Even I knew that one. I hear that slogan pretty often, that beat Army. A lot of people seem to go around saying that.
That's funny. Well, that's again, as opposed to the game that they had last year, I'm excited to again see this back in a stadium, and hopefully we'll have control of the pandemic to be able to have a full stadium there and watch that on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, Navy is hosting Air Force on the
11th,
on September 11th.
Right. That's going to be a crazy weekend.
Yeah, it is going to be a crazy weekend, and it's going to be, a lot, very emotional. 14 Naval Academy grads were killed on 9/11, either in the Pentagon, where one of my wife's company mates was killed that day, Commander Bill Donovan. Some were piloting the airplane. Some were there was a Reserve Admiral who was a passenger on one of the airplanes, him and his wife. So, 9/11. We've lost a lot of Naval Academy graduates in the subsequent conflicts after that, but on that specific day, we lost 14 graduates that day. So it'll be a very poignant anniversary that day against Air Force. So beat Army, but then beat Air Force as well. True.
And the one thing that I do love about whatever service academy you're competing against in whatever way it would be, is that, in the end, you're all on the same team. My father was in World War II. He was a Marine down in the Pacific. And I ended up, had the chance to meet Woody, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name, who is the oldest living Medal of Honor recipient. And he was so funny. I was talking to him about my dad and stuff like that. He says, "Oh my gosh, those guys got the shit beat out of them." I said, and everything else. And he says, what was he in? I said, "Oh, he was in the Marines." He says, "Oh, thank God. I thought you were going to say he was the Army." And it was like, so there's this guy that's, he was almost 90, I guess, at the time when I spoke to him, and he said, yeah, no, he was, he said, "Oh my God, thank God. I thought you were going to say he was in the Army." He said, "At least he's a jarhead. We're good." But hey, I want to thank you guys very much for your time. I would encourage you to go to the yard and see the Herndon Climb, but unfortunately it's going to be closed to the public this year. But if you ever get the chance to take a day off when the Naval Academy is in their commissioning week or their graduation week, this is something that you may see a clip of as Scott did on ESPN at some point, but it doesn't do justice. And I think you can probably, confirm that, to be in there absolutely. In person. To see,
and you need to get there early too to get a good spot. people start lining up as soon as the academy gates open at 6 o'clock. They come with their lawn chairs and they seize those good spots. It gets pretty crowded. So
it really does, and
it is quite a spectacle.
It's unbelievable. And the Herndon Climb: A History of the United States Naval Academy's Greatest Traditions, available again at Amazon, here locally at Old Fox Books and Back Creek Books, or you can get it at USNI.org, which is the United States Naval Institute Press, which is the publisher of that. And we are speaking with authors Rear Admiral James McNeal and Scott Tomasheski. Thank you guys very much for your time today.
Thank you,
Thanks
John.
so much, John. Appreciate it.
This has been a bonus podcast from Eye on Annapolis. Please visit us at eyeonannapolis.net. Follow us on Facebook at All Annapolis and on Twitter at Eye on Annapolis. And if you haven't subscribed to the Daily News Brief podcast, go for it. And all of your local news will be delivered to your phone, tablet, or smart device by 6 a.m. every Monday through Friday.